Welcome to Up in the Blue Seats, a New York Rangers podcast and show from the New York Post. My name is Emma Kate Austin. I'm one of the producers of the show, but I will be your host today. I will be joined by longtime Post columnist and Hall of Famer Larry Brooks and former New York Ranger Brian Boyle. We have a lot to get into today. The Rangers have lost 3 straight. They're reeling. Laviolette's calling out his players, saying everyone needs to be better. And then, of course, on Monday, Sportsnet's Elliot Friedman posted that the Rangers have made it very clear that they are interested in making moves and shaking up their roster. Among the names indicated are Chris Kreider and Jacob Trouba, although other names will be considered. So let's bring in Larry and Brian to dive into all this. Guys, thanks so much for joining me today. Again, we got a lot to talk about since we last had you on. Larry, I'll just start with you. What do you make of this entire situation and the idea that these guys are open for business, and especially, when it comes to Chris Kreider and Jacob Trouba?
I think the results have finally caught up with the Rangers' play this season. So there's a recognition, I think, from the hierarchy, from Chris Drury, from everybody in management, that this is just not good enough, that they are not playing up to any kind of standard, and honestly haven't all year. I think there's a bad mix. I'm not sure exactly how this originated, but they knew. Let me go back. When they lost to Florida last year, they knew they weren't going to be able to run it back. They knew they weren't good enough, and they tried to make moves. They were blocked from trading Jacob Trouba, and so they had very little maneuverability over the summer. They went into the season with the same team. The same team doesn't do well the second year under a coach. I don't know why. It's been this way for a while. And so Chris Drury, I think, tried to jumpstart the team by sending a memo to the 31 other general managers that were open for business. I don't particularly like sending messages through intermediaries. I would much rather have Chris Drury walk into the room and demand accountability from the team leaders. But that's where we are now, and I think there's a lot of tension around the room. Their best players have not been their best players. You can look at Panarin has played pretty well, I think, but there's just something off. There's something off in the room. There's something off on the ice. There's something off in the mix, and it's very difficult to make major changes in a hard cap system. And so, do I think that the Rangers will be better off by trading Chris Kreider? No, I don't. But if the objective is to blow it up, then there are limited avenues to take. So, the whole vibe has been off this year. It started with all the talk about Shesterkin. The opener. It wasn't about the Rangers. It was about how much money Shesterkin was going to get, and that was kind of narrative for 2 weeks. And so I just don't think it's been a healthy environment for this team all year. And I know they got off 12-4-1 because of great goaltending, because of the schedule they had. But to me, it's been off all season.
Yeah, I mean, they haven't been at their best. It's just not what we were accustomed to seeing. We spoke about that even when they were winning games. But I don't know. I don't know how GMs work. I've never been around a GM when they're doing business, how they send memos or whatever they do. I don't know how any of that stuff works. I just know if Elliot's reporting something or Larry's reporting something, there's a certain amount of truth to that. So there's definitely, I guess, just impatience going on. He doesn't really like what he's seen. Larry's seen enough hockey, and I've seen enough of this team, especially like this isn't, regardless of the record, with the goal of being get 6 more wins than we did last year. that's not good enough. Last night they were tired. They didn't have any energy, and it wasn't because I don't think because they weren't trying. I just think there's an issue defensively. There's an issue like schematically, really, with how they do things. They break out slow. I mean, Peter Laviolette's press conference, if you want to just go and listen to that, all those things are what, I'm thinking to myself watching them play lately. They're trying to make plays. They're trying to do things, but they're shooting themselves in the foot sometimes because it's the wrong thing to do at that time. There's certain times to simplify things. There's other times where you can get creative, but you have to build to that throughout the course of a game. It's go north, get the puck out of your zone, get it into their zone, and that way you're not giving up 40 shots a night. It's too hard to play that way when you defend 4 or 5 games in a row. Those 4 or 5 games aren't equal to 4 or 5 games and you're winning. You think you're on a streak because you're feeling good about yourself. No, like it's hard to break out of this because it's more taxing on you when you're in your own zone all the time. Even if you're not doing it well, you're still there. You're still taxing the body. Then you fly from Edmonton back to New York. You play a day and a half later, 2 days later, and yeah, this is a team that just fired their coach. There's a lot of things that went against them last night, so I'm not trying to make an excuse for them, but the body language part of it is the part I don't like.
Well, let me ask you this. How would you react if you were in that room and you knew that the general manager had sent out a memo, probably anticipating that it would be leaked? You can't send out a communication to 31 general managers and not expect it to become public fairly quickly. And so
I wouldn't quit playing.
If you're in that room 2 hours before the game, 3 hours before the game, what are you thinking? What's the conversation like with your buddy in the next stall? Are you motivated for the game that's coming?
Hell yeah.
Or are you thinking about too much that you can't focus on what you need to do?
We're talking about a veteran group. This is guys that have played in the league. These are grown men these are adults. You can't control a lot of stuff that goes on. There's certain things you can. And if you're in a leadership position on the team as a player, you go in there business as usual, get excited to play a hockey game and try and elevate the whole entire room. Like these things are always, you're going to have calls that go against you. You're going to have, the coach he's got to worry about 18 skaters. He might not see who's going right away that night. You might not get the shifts you think you deserve. Different things happen where you have no control over it as a player. This is one of them. And I don't know, if you get attacked, it doesn't matter who it's from. If you get a guy who cheap shots a teammate, you go after him. If it's like, here's a shot across the bow from a GM or a coach, stand up for yourself and show him why you want to play more and why he shouldn't change things, or why I'm not a guy that you're going to ship out of there. Unless you want to get moved, then go in his office and tell him move me, because then that'll be better for everybody too. It's things like this where, it's good we talk about it because it's definitely newsworthy, but this is an opportunity for them in the room to come together and say, no, this is our team, and I'll show you how we can play. We'll show you how we can turn this thing around on our own. I saw later in the game, down 2, a puck doesn't go his way, and Panarin did nothing. He didn't even try to get back, and the puck was within a stick length of it. And I'm not coming at him, because without him, I don't know what their record is. But you don't think Brett Berard's watching Panarin every shift, his first game in the NHL? You don't think his eyes are glued to that guy, trying to see what I can learn? And that's the point. Like, how we do anything is how we do everything. There's never a time where you can fold, no matter what. Don't give up the ship. And until something happens, it's business as usual.
One thing that's interesting is Trouba, Mika, and Fox, they were not made available to the media tonight. Isn't this kind of on them? Like, shouldn't they be the ones speaking up and taking responsibility for this? Not being, what am I saying? Responding to the messages being sent by the coaching staff and front office.
I had a conversation yesterday, Larry. You could correct me, but I was talking with Michelle Gingras, who worked in Tampa when I was there. When we got in the room in Tampa, on the whiteboard, it would have written on it media, and there'd be 3 numbers. Before I got to Tampa, that was never a thing. We sat in the room,
Right.
you kind of respected and spoke. If a member of the media came and approached you, you'd speak to them. And if you were me, I could leave and it wouldn't be a huge deal. But Ryan Callahan is in that stall every game. Henrik Lundqvist was in that stall every single game. And Ryan went through, I mean, you can maybe remind me.
Well, there were every night, there were Girardi, McDonough, Stahl. 3 of them sitting, side by each.
Yeah.
Every night they were there. Every night Ryan Callahan as the captain was there. Every night Derek Stepan was there. Every night Henrik Lundqvist was there. It is not just on the Rangers, though, that this has changed. There was a shift around the league. Now the teams have their own, their .coms, NHL.com, all the social media work that they do.
That makes sense.
The independent media is not really needed as much. And so it is it is so different from the way that I grew up. I mean, I would walk in, every player would be there. We
made a point of that, Larry. He said you can't run. If we lose a couple of games, you don't run away from the media. We talked about that on practice days when it wasn't going well. Hey, last thing before everyone leaves, stay in the room. Talk to the media. We face the media. We actually spoke of that. And then when I went to Tampa, everything was different, and then it never was the same anywhere I went after that.
Right. Well, I didn't know that it happened that way in Tampa because it didn't. It arrived much later in New York because still through really up until when the 17, 18, 19 season was pretty good, and then things started to shift. There was the numbers on the board. There were requests. The original question, it was very disappointing not to see Jacob Trouba in the room last night. It was very disappointing not to see Adam Fox in the room last night. Panarin came out and spoke, and I thought I thought his comments were heartfelt, and I thought they were genuine, and I think they were on point. But the other guys who came out and spoke, and they're terrific kids, and maybe they should be the spokesman for the team, but it was Cooley. Berard, of course, because it was his first game. Braden Schneider talked. It was disappointing. It's a good question. There's something off, and I felt that I remember talking on this podcast. I think maybe the season preview, and I said then that I didn't like the feeling I got from the last week of training camp. I really was so bullish on the team going into camp, even though they were the same team. I thought, listen, and I liked the way I liked their first week of training camp too. I did, and then something kind of got stuck, and I didn't like their last week of camp. I thought they were going to have a very challenging season. I picked them to finish 3rd in the division. I didn't have them going to the conference final. So I thought this was going to be a challenging year, and it is. It's a very challenging year. It reminds me a lot of 2 years ago. They go to the conference finals, they come back and they just don't play. They just don't play. And that year, though, Trouba was invested. Remember, he threw his helmet when things were going. He had a tirade, and that changed the season around.
Right.
That's not happening now. I don't think there's anyone in there that is going to pull that kind of tirade or what. It's a flatline team. It's a flatline team right now. And maybe Drury was trying to jumpstart it. I think, there are rational explanations for last night, but not the way they didn't respond at all in the third period.
Yeah,
they were tired. Okay. St. Louis had a new
lead.
coach. Okay. But you've got to compete.
No, there wasn't, there was no real threat of tying that game or pressing or pushing. It was a good start.
And you know what? And you know what? I haven't mentioned this at all. They miss Philip Hedl. You can see. They don't have a bottom six. Their top six is having enough trouble when you include Zibanejad. I don't know what to say about Mika. Honestly, he's playing so poorly. Maybe he needs a break. Honestly, maybe he does, but maybe that sends him into a deeper spiral. It's obviously in his head. But they have issues with their top six, but they have really no effective bottom six at all without Hedl. So so the Hedl injury honestly came at the worst time. But it's also on them because they have they don't have any replacement for him. And you had to anticipate that this might happen, right? You had to.
Yeah.
You couldn't go into the season being confident that Philip Hedl was going to play 82 games. But they don't have a third line center. They're using.
Hey, I will say,
they're using
Capo,
who hasn't played in 6 years.
He played all right. I didn't hate it.
All right.
I didn't hate the center. Hey, center's hard. He got the puck through the middle of the ice with speed. The neutral zone, but through the middle of the neutral zone with speed. He did what he did on the boards on the wall behind the net. It's not a pretty goal, but you got Will Cooley going to the net. There wasn't any sort of net traffic last night. He went to the net, hits his skate, and goes in.
Yeah.
And then the Cooley second goal, it's Cooley just going in a straight line, winning a battle. Berard winning a battle.
Right.
And then Mika can do things like that pass. That he made it look very easy. It's a puck that squirts out. It's off his backhand, right to his forehand, right on a tee, and he made a quick play. I actually thought, I know how high Mika's ceiling is and what Rangers fans peak Mika looks like, and we're not there yet, but I'm judging him in the games that I've seen live mostly, and I saw him in Buffalo, and I saw him last night, and last night for a lot of stretches was better than what I saw when he played Buffalo. There was just he was like almost paralyzed against Buffalo. At least, I don't know, maybe he had some speed, maybe he had some guys that were getting him a little bit of space, but he definitely obviously knows he needs to play better. I think there needs to be more pace in Fox's game. They just kind of back off and then they cover the other guys. So he needs to start turning his engine on and create things on his own. He's such a great distributor, and he's not a one-trick pony, but the league's smart. They figure things out. There's a number of different things that are, if everybody's like 5% below what their baseline is in this league, it gets ugly fast, and they're just not quite there. And then, they're not catching a break. They can't sustain it for long periods of time. When they make a mistake, it seems to be catastrophic. And that gets into your psyche as a player, as a team. You think you have to play an absolutely perfect game. The top six needs to make all these great plays because that's what, when they're winning and when they're on and when they're the fun Rangers, those two lines were appointment television. They made it look like they were like Globetrotters the last couple of years when they're on, right, Larry?
Yeah.
They think they have to get to that. They don't. They got to start somewhere else and kind of build back to that.
But they think they are that. They think they are that, and they're not. And you know what? If they are that, you can't win that way. You can win a lot of games. They've won a lot of games over the last few years. They're a really good team generally. They're not now. They haven't been at all this year. But over the last couple of years, they've been a very good team, but not good enough.
Right.
And really, they're so close. They're so close. We've talked about this over and over and over. When you're 6 wins away, you're not that close. You're not. It's not like they were Edmonton last year and lost in the 7th game of the Cup final and can say, "Oh, this play, if only this play." They came up six wins short, dominated in the conference final. 2 years after, they came up 6 wins short, dominated in the conference final by a more physical team, bigger, more physical team. So if this is who the Rangers are, if this is who the Rangers think they are, if this is who the Rangers want to be, it's not going to be good enough. I don't know.
Yeah, no, you're right. Well, it's like, I mean, it's not going to work this year if it didn't work last year, and we're not. Yeah, you have to make some changes. What's won? I mean, what's won in the last few years? What always wins? What did Hedl skate today?
Hedl, there was an optional, and I believe, yes, Philip worked at one end while the guys were at the other end. Yeah.
Oh, geez. So
Kreider did not skate.
Right.
Brian, I have a question. So, kind of going back to that top 6, these guys who have been on this roster for so long, who have, been kind of quiet. Do you think they have the leadership in the locker room they need to really turn this around and get back to where they need to be, or beyond that?
Yeah, I do. I think that they have. It's really hard when you're. I mean, go down the list of your leadership core, and none of them have been sort of where they expect to be as players. They haven't performed just knowing a few of them, that's not where they want to be as players. So what do? You're not the coach. When you're, a leader on that team, you're certainly not the coach. So you can't distribute ice time. You can't make line changes. You just have to play and be encouraging and be positive and be the hardest worker in practice. You can demand more from other guys, but it's really hard to demand when you have more to give in terms of your results, your production. Like, I don't doubt anybody's going home after that game feeling good, being like, we'll get them tomorrow. I mean, I don't think that that's the case at all. I think that these guys are, racking their brains thinking, what are we going to do here to turn this thing around? You don't get to this level and you don't have the success that they've all had without a kind of a crazy mindset that you're always consumed by this. So that there's no doubt. I mean, fans might disagree with me, but I have zero doubts that they care a tremendous amount. How are they channeling all of these emotions? I don't know if it's 100% the right way, but they can only control so much as players. So it's up to Laviolette and the staff and the players collectively to come out of this together, because this is what you have right now. Until that changes, this is what you have. You have to figure out ways to put guys in positions that's going to, be successful for them as players and for the team. It's not, and if it's a long enough sample size where they haven't played well enough, then you got to change their role a little bit. And it's not a demotion just for, hey, get in line. It's here's a little bit of a smaller bite. Master this, get back to your foundational things that make you a good player, and we'll go from there. And it gets other guys involved. It gets Will Cooley more ice. It gets Berard some ice. It gets guys that are bringing energy, might lack the finishing touches around the net or whatever. But collectively, as 18 skaters, you're way harder to play against. So that's kind of you want to shift it up a little bit, move things around, and have, top 6, bottom 6, throw it out the window. When you can't defend, it doesn't matter.
Right. Well, it's interesting too, because Laviolette did try and shake things up a few weeks ago. And, there was a response for maybe a game or two, maybe a game. And there was, it was not sustainable. So I get there's a balancing act. You need to give elite players enough time, to so they can perform up to their, the back of their baseball card. But the insistence over the last couple of weeks on staying with this first power play unit when they have not been productive at all. Honestly, they've scored like 6 power play goals the last 15 or 16 games. But sending that first unit on over and over and over again, depriving Philip Hedl, who was their best player, of ice time, depriving Lafreniere of ice time, depriving Will Cooley, who wasn't even on the second power play unit, of ice time. I wrote about it almost every day, and I just don't understand it. Again, you respect players for their resumes. I get it. And we're talking about upper echelon players who have succeeded, but 15, 16, 17 games, you need to make some changes. You need, and I've said this, I've written this, they need to start turning it over. They need to give the ice time to the players who earn it, not the players who have the biggest names. Philip Hedl should have been getting more ice time. Will Cooley should have been getting more ice time. Lafreniere should be getting more ice time. And I know I don't think Braden Schneider has played well at all the last week or so, but I thought that he demanded more ice time, and I think he has. And you've talked about this too, Brian. He's been a lesser player as a third pair player than he was as a second pair player, and maybe maybe he needs to learn that. Maybe that's on him. And let me say this. We talk about the coaching, we talk about Drury, the hierarchy, whatever. It always comes back to the player. In the end, ultimately, it always comes back to the player. Let me give a shout out to the Ridgefield Lions, who won 3 golds at Can-Am and 2 silvers at Can-Am last weekend. So a shout out to the Ridgefield Lions. But as folks do, we're talking about coaching and what happened in the game that at 8 o'clock that morning, and why wasn't this player on the power? Why didn't he play? And it always comes back even to then. It's on the player, right? It's on the player. It's on the 13-year-old. It's on the 12-year-old. It's on the 11-year-old, and it's on the 33-year-old, right?
It's funny you bring up youth hockey. We talk about it all the time. We play against teams that we get a lead and they start. I'm talking baseball bat swings. These are 9-year-olds. So I'm looking over at the coaches of the other team. Like, you're going to keep playing this kid, okay? And our team starts retaliating. We win a big game against a rival team. I go in the locker room after everybody's happy, and there was a moment in the game. A kid on the bench yelled at a kid on the other team. A kid on the bench from my team. So I go in the room, I go, who said that to number whatever? And the kid raises his hand all proud, and I kind of lit him up. And then I went into a spiel like, you are responsible for your own actions. We do not act that way, no matter what. If we win, if we lose, if we take 10 penalties and the ref's wrong 10 times, you go to the box and you be quiet. This is how we are. We control what we control, and that's not how we behave here. And if... when we're on the car ride home and my son's like, we were at the power play for 30 seconds. I got taken off. I tell him at 9 years old, play better. So it's play better. He said, well, this happened and that happened. Okay, play better. You're the one on the ice doing it, right? So if I got, and that's to Braden Schneider point, and to me coming up, it took me a lot of years to figure out how to play. There were times in the same year with Torts, I'd play 6 minutes for a few games, and then I'd play 14, and then I'd play 9, and I was all over the map. It depended on how the game went and what kind of mood he was in that day. I couldn't control that. All I knew I had to learn was, no matter when it is or how often it is or how infrequently it is, when I'm on the ice, I'm responsible to do my job well.
Right.
You saw it with Schneider when he got brought down. He was very tentative in that Buffalo game at home because he got moved down to the third pair again. I thought he was playing free and easy before that. You got to overcome those things. all these things. The New York Rangers went to the conference finals last year. Teams are going to come into Madison Square Garden. You don't think they're going to give you their best? You don't think they're going to be jacked up to play? That's what you got to understand. Doesn't anything else around you? You got in late from Edmonton, whatever it is. You have, when you're on the ice, you got to perform up to a certain standard that you signed the contract for. It's hard.
Yeah. And one of the things, and we've talked about shaking things up a little bit. They don't, I can't remember what it was. A couple of weeks ago, we were talking about AHL and, who they have down there in Hartford. They brought up Brett Berard. He had somewhat of a decent game last night.
Mm-hmm.
What do you guys make of your first impressions of him as a New York Ranger?
Oh, he's an energy guy. I like the way he played. Whether he can, carve out a role for himself. He's small. He's small. I know, because when I'm able to look kind of eye to eye with a player in the room, he's small. He's small. I remember years and years ago walking into the Devils room when Brian Giunta was first there. I couldn't believe it. Honestly, I couldn't believe it. And the fact that these guys, I have so much respect for them, and so much admiration for them. And probably, I don't say it enough. I don't, we don't genuflect. But these guys, and again, going back to youth hockey, my grandson Scott's in his first year of 14U, so it's the first year of hitting. He's a smaller guy. He's a smaller.
Don't get me started on that hitting rule.
He's a smaller finesse guy, and it's just Wild West, first year hitting 14U. And he's playing against kids now who are 6, 8 inches bigger, 40, 50 pounds heavier. And they're trying to take his head off. They're just, that's what it is. That's what 14U is, at least at the start of the season, and certainly a number of teams all season. And watching him figure it out, just watching him have the courage to go on and play is remarkable to me. He's a good player, but I'm so proud of him that he just goes out there. And so here is Brett Berard. Honestly, he's not bigger than I am, and he's in the National Hockey League. It's remarkable. It's just remarkable, and the way he plays too. He's an energy guy. He's on the puck. He's going to take every hit to make a play. He's inspirational. I hope he's able to make it. I do. And I think the Rangers need those kinds of players, because they need those kinds of effective players.
I remember just being infuriated with those smaller, shiftier, low center of gravity, but still strong guys, because I couldn't hit him. If I hit him or lined him up finally, I'd probably take a penalty. But I hate the fact that those kids don't hit until they're 14 for the reasons you just said.
Yeah.
There's such a discrepancy in size. They don't know where the danger zones are. It's crazy. Brett Berard, we didn't talk about him as much, I don't think, because he's not really a center, but he's been great down there. Patulny said it. He said he's been their best, most consistent player. And you earn a call-up. That's a great thing to see. That's really awesome. I was happy for him. You only get to do that once.
All right. Well, I'm glad we were able to end things on a bit of a lighter note, something a little more positive. Thank you guys for joining me. We'll have to see kind of how things shake out. I know we had that Momo, and Kreider and Trouba will be in the news. We'll have to see, if we have seen the last few days of them as Rangers, but we'll keep you guys updated, and we'll be back again next week to talk more Rangers hockey. Thank you guys so much for watching.